Hello and welcome to episode 138 of the Foundry Roundtable, a podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogyn1701, and alongside me are the Kelvin Timeline versions of DuncanIdaho, Markhawkman, and Greendragoon.
I'm pretty much the same in this timeline as I am in any other. I'm very boring like that.
I'm black.
And so that must mean Mark gets the evil goatee, right?
Yep. So I've changed it. Yeah, I've changed.
Actually, my species isn't capable of growing goatees. If you look closely, I have this evil-looking red symbol on my forehead, which is covered by my hair.
Well, still, that's convenient for identification. So anyway, obviously that's my way of saying, big news. The Kelvin Timeline, which is the official term for it now, for what people have been calling the J.J. Abrams verse, is coming to Star Trek Online. We got the official word this week in first a devlog, which talked about the new mission, and we got that actual mission put up on Tribble. We will try not to spoil too much of this mission, but obviously you hop timelines over to this other timeline and assist the USS Yorktown and what is his name? 0718?
Yep.
Yeah, Science Officer 0718.
Yeah, the cyborg.
I suppose we could call him 718.
There you go. We got 7 of 9 and then 718. Everything's sevens in this universe. 47?
And multiples of 9.
There you go.
7 is a very cool number.
Yes. Yes, it is.
I have to admit, for a character that was essentially a background character, he was actually kind of fun to have in the mission.
Yeah, I liked him.
Another one that, while it was technically a background character, that would be kind of cool is Zara.
Remind me which one.
In the movies, the only thing you see of Zara is she's one of the bridge officers on the Enterprise.
Does she have the big eyes?
No, she's the human who is platinum blonde.
I think I might know who you're talking
Sorry, I couldn't see her through the lens flare.
Well, actually, no. She's got brown hair. It's just the hair color is just lens flare.
Anyway,
SFC 100 was asking who would be the first person to joke about lens flares. And Dragoon takes the...
in the comics, though, she helps with that that neural parasite infestation that Kirk had to deal with. I think it was Geneva.
Funny you should mention neural parasites because they're going to come up in one of the Agents of Yesterday missions.
Mm-hmm.
Spoiler alert. We won't say too much more about that. But in any case, just so it's all out in the open, I'm going to go around to each of you guys and ask you what you think of the new movies, because I'm not sure if we've probably covered it a little bit over the years, but so Dragoon first. What do you think of the new?
They're all right. I enjoyed 2009 more than I did Into Darkness. I think I don't passionately hate it like some people do, but yeah, there was a lot of things about Into Darkness that fell flat or just didn't come out right. But I will say that I did get to play this new mission, and I actually really enjoyed it.
Okay. Mark, what did you think of the new movies?
I liked them overall. It's one of those things where you... what's the word for it? It's not so much whether I liked it or disliked it that was important. It's trying to understand why they made it that way that I found to be most interesting when watching it, because one thing that Gene Roddenberry had mentioned in certain interviews was how often he felt, I guess you could say, shackled by the technical limitations of the special effects that he could use. Which it's one thing that he brought up in a discussion about the animated series, is that he really wanted to do things in the animated series like that mission where they go to the planet Argo and then swim around in Argo's ocean. I mean, he wished he could do things like that in TOS, but he couldn't because doing a single episode like that would eat up his entire special effects budget for the entire season.
Mm-hmm.
And with that in mind, I really think that a lot of the stuff you see in the new movies is stuff that he kind of wished he could do, but he couldn't.
Almost sort of like George Lucas, right?
Yeah, really.
Although I wouldn't call that a positive example. But we'll leave
Still,
any
though,
discussion of the prequels and special editions to another time.
The similarity exists, regardless
Sure.
of whether it's good or bad.
All right, Duncan, what did you think of the new movie?
So next to me right here is my copy of Star Trek 2009. I thought it was I liked the movie. I don't passionately like it. It's next to my copy of the 1984 version of Dune, but it's something that's like, okay, well, I did overall get a positive vibe from that. I like the style, not necessarily the presentation as much, but the sort of the way it was going. I mean, it was sort of this like, it's an interesting take. It has a unique feel to it that does feel different from the other Star Trek, but does feel in some ways complementary. It's just there's some things it does creatively and I'm like, eh. And it's a lot more in the style of movie and certain directions it takes with characters, which put it much more in the same genre, I'd say, as Transformers than other things. And I think it's specifically the genre of Transformers type movies. And in that genre, it's very good, but I wouldn't necessarily extend it beyond that.
That genre being big, giant blockbuster.
Well, not necessarily big, giant blockbusters, because Marvel does something a little bit different. It's big, giant blockbusters of a certain type that kind of go for really sort of polished special effects vibe and really don't try to do as much heavy lifting with the characters. So it's a very direct way of doing a big special effects movie, and there's plenty of exceptions. I hated Into Darkness. I'm sorry to say. It's just, for me, I couldn't, like, there was one scene I really like in that entire movie, and that's just the stuff they get up to on Kronos. I like that bit. That bit was great.
That's fun, and I liked the production design there.
Yeah,
Really
and I really like the Kelvin Timeline Klingons. Except for the fact that they did make...
Well, you're in luck.
Well, yeah, that's
because
the one thing
they're coming to Stowe too.
That was my one comment. I just want that helmet. But as far as the rest of the movie goes, I really have to put it below certain Mystery Science Theater movies I've seen. It's just I just can't watch it. For me, because it's the holes like in the presentation, and it just everything is dysfunctional to me when I'm watching that. Like I can. Like nothing feels right. Whereas Star Trek 2009, certain things felt really good. Other things, it was sort of hit and miss. Where with Into Darkness, it's with that one exception on Kronos for me, it's all miss. And it's not just miss in terms of a Star Trek movie, it's just in terms of a movie. Like I just really can't watch it for characters, action, anything like that. My brain just it just rebels. It's like, no, I'm not seeing da. I mean, it's just that entire reaction to that the entire movie. So anyway, I mean, the one thing that would have redeemed it for me, like after that whole thing, is if they didn't make Khan a bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
That would have had the redeeming creative aspect, and then it would have taken the movie in a different direction, and that would have worked for me. And that would have put pieces together and kind of justified it. Or what I've seen other people go through is not have Khan at all and just have that a different type of movie. But with all the elements in place, scene by scene, like Scotty's got some pretty good stuff going on, but it's really just it for me it has the feeling of Simon Pegg trying to hold up the entire production just through one performance.
Yeah, I kind of got to say, I mean, I definitely do
Didn't he
feel
write
that.
Into Darkness or co-write it?
I'm not sure.
Not Into Darkness.
No,
not
the
the
new
new
one.
one.
He wrote the new
Oh.
one. Beyond.
Okay, never mind then.
Which I am kind of looking forward to in the sense that I think Into Dark or not Into Darkness. What is it? Star Trek Beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm kind of looking at that, hoping it's going to be okay. We know we screwed up with Into Darkness, but we're going to try and fix it here. Because I mean, it looks like they're going in directions that are not the same mistakes that they made in Into Darkness.
well,
Now, it could be they make whole new mistakes, but
I for me, it's going to be the question of how much red shirting do they do throughout the early part of the movie to set up the bad guys? Because the crew gets captured, and sort of how that goes, I think, could really affect the tone of the movie and take it from fun to kind of depressing.
That's one thing I've noticed about them is that they don't really go to this. They seem to be making an effort not to explicitly kill off characters unless they have a specific story reason for it. Like with Pike, they had a very specific reason for killing him, but
they had. But
well, that was all about the effect on Kirk.
Yeah, it was mostly to make it personal.
Because he was the surrogate father figure.
But it wasn't like a red shirt thing. It was, a story moment.
There's plenty of red shirting, though, throughout most of these movies when it comes just to miscellaneous background characters. So main characters, of course, they are more considerate with. But for Inner Darkness, I mean, the last half of the movie is just the Enterprise getting shot. And this is my huge problem with that entire segment of just like there's three moments where the Enterprise is basically screwed and is saved through Deus Ex Machina. The Enterprise never fires back throughout Into Darkness, at least as far as I can remember. It never fires back, and for me, that really did start to get in. Like, I don't know what themes this is presenting, but it weirded me out a little bit.
I think that where they were going with that was the idea that conventional methods would not have been effective against the Vengeance anyways. So they decided they were going to try unconventional methods.
That was true with the Scimitar as well, and also the Narada.
I mean, because let's face it, when they fired at the Narada, how much good did that do?
It did nothing, but it was still the fact that you're firing back. Like, for me, the entire last half of Into Darkness is basically the Enterprise is helpless. It is stretching out that moment throughout the entire movie, and it's really hammered in the fact that they don't ever try fighting back. They're just trying to run away. And that really sets up a... anyway, for me, that just sets up a really sort of weird tone. And it just does not... I just don't react well to that.
I mean, I think we can all agree there was...
Yeah.
Well,
there was some...
one example I was thinking of in particular is Gala. You see her, and they kind of sort of hint that she might be dead, but you never actually see them confirm that she's dead.
It's just sort of something that was never picked up on again.
Well, I kind of think that they intentionally left it vague because they didn't want to go there.
They shot a scene, you can see it on the Blu-rays, where Kirk goes up to another green-skinned woman on the Enterprise later on in the movie and starts talking to her, not realizing that she's not Gala. And then they realized that Gala was dead by that point, so they took it out because they thought it'd be in bad taste. Or that's the story. But anyway, to wrap all this up, the
explanation for the scene though kind of what's the best way to put this? It's it's one of those things where they left it open and enough that they could, come back later and use the character and say that she was like, adrift in a shuttlecraft at the time that Kirk was talking to the other woman, because that was pretty. That's like a few hours after they had that fleet get ripped apart and they hadn't finished finding survivors yet or something.
Well, anyway, to wrap all this up, I kind of look at the Kelvin timeline as kind of on the same order as the Mirror Universe. It's something alternate to the main thread of Star Trek that is fun to visit sometimes.
Yeah.
Because it can be so different.
Yeah, and
even down to the size of the ships, which is a big debate. And it's something that is fun to visit and is fun. Will be fun to visit in Stowe for a little, and then we can get back to the main stuff.
Yeah, and I am looking forward to the Kelvin stuff because there's certain things I really like. The visuals, the art design, I do like that. It's just that one particular movie. It's just like, okay, I'm just going to skip it.
And that's what's going to translate into Stowe is the visuals, the art design, and
exactly
one particular minor character.
Yeah. Well, even if they brought in like more than that, I'm perfectly happy with it because it is Stowe. They're not suddenly making this into a completely different video game and production style and all that.
At the moment, the entirety of it is one mission.
And I should point out that while it is set in the Kelvin timeline, the story draws heavy inspiration from Star Trek Enterprise.
Yeah, probably more so than anything else.
Yeah, because it isn't said to be the influence of those alien people that caused it in the first place.
Well, we won't want to spoil it for people. We'll wait till it hits the live servers, which is just a couple weeks. But in any case, as far as the Foundry goes, the speculation, of course, is that we're going to get some of these ships as playable ships. Currently, in that mission, you see the Constitution class, which if you want to put up some of my screenshots, as an NPC ship. You see the Constitution class, and then you also encounter Klingons, and there's some ships labeled D4X at the moment, which is, I believe, the designation for the Klingon ship you see in Into Darkness. But at the moment, they're not hooked up for a new model, so they're just Borels at the moment. I'm sure later on we'll get appropriate universe ships for that.
I want that too.
Yeah.
I just thought that
heard
was
there's
kind of
something
bullshit.
interesting that the devs are working on for that.
Well, I'm sure there will be more confirmed as time goes on, because we still have a couple weeks yet, and we will see. But obviously, I think they've done a really nice job on the models for sure.
Oh yeah.
And if you want to put up the bridge, Dragoon.
It's up.
Now, one thing about the bridge is that, obviously, I think the lighting, it's going to look different in the game as opposed to the movies. The lighting is going to be vastly different. Now, also, it actually may look more similar once we get the lighting update. That'd be my guess.
I should also point out that this is not the Enterprise. This is a different
Also
ship.
true. This is the Yorktown. But in any case, the mission is pretty fun. So the question also came up, what does this mean for the Foundry? Does this mean now we can use stuff from the Kelvin timeline? Well, it's a gray area because unless they update the EULA, the end user license agreement allows us to use materials from specific properties, not just all of Star Trek. And right now that doesn't include Star Trek 2009 and Star Trek Into Darkness. So unless they update that, it's, but what if they put the ships in but don't update the EULA? What happens then? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer.
Well, then we ask.
Then we ask, yes.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like how they put in NPC versions of Sela and Hakib.
Well, Hakib doesn't have any sort of...
Yeah, Hakib's not an actor.
But yeah, he's not the only one.
Yeah. There's actor likeness issues Now I can see Worf getting around that issue because he is so heavily made up that it doesn't necessarily look like Michael Dorn anymore, and aged as well. Obviously, the Sela look-alike, that's a bit more of a gray area.
And it's obviously something that was put in there intentionally, and not just a random Romulan who happens to look like Sela.
Like some of the joke Voyager crew members, like Perry Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, is there any story behind those? I've always been confused.
Harry Jim
I
was some
think it's
kind of
just
running
Zero
gag with,
messing around.
Yeah.
Harry Jim was some running
those-
gag with Zero.
Those descriptions for the Foundry costumes, a lot of those are something that Zero made up on the spur of the moment. No planning, just, ooh, what's this?
It could be.
Awesome.
But I'll tell you one thing that I quite a while ago I stumbled on ways to make a couple of the costumes from the new movies in the costume creator. So Dragoon, if you want to put those up. The first one is the original uniforms from the USS Kelvin, which obviously are sort of pre-TOS uniforms. I used the All Good Things uniform and colored it blue, and then the pants slightly darker blue with kind of black highlights and a belt.
Well, one thing someone pointed out to me a while back is that we actually had at launch a costume which, well, it wasn't what you would call a faithful reproduction of the costumes from the Kelvin Timeline stuff, but it has a strong similarity to it. Because you may have noticed that some of the Sierra variants have that hexagonal texture to the cloth, and a similar cut, I guess you can put it, which kind of seems intentional.
Welcome Zeronius Rex to the chat room.
Hey, we were just talking about her.
Harry Jim came up in discussion.
I was typing out a question for that. See if we get an answer. And then the other screenshot, if you want to put that up, is Admiral Marcus's uniform from when he's on the Vengeance. I used the the motion picture uniform, which also itself was used for what's his name, Admiral Pike when he made it. So if we don't get actual versions of these, there's ways to make them. That are fairly easy.
One thing just occurred to me that we don't have right now is that we don't actually have the ability to make things do this in the Foundry. Because obviously the effect exists, but we don't have the ability to select that particular animation in Foundry.
Which animation?
Place turrets.
The Kelvin Timeline transporter effect when beaming in and out.
Oh yeah, we were talking about that a little bit before the show. How since launch, really, we've had that sort of swirly transporter effect on turrets and that sort of thing. Well, in any case, let's move along to other things. We've got the Alliance Exploration Initiative mission challenge voting has started. So we've got 8 missions that were submitted for our Foundry challenge, and they are all up. The official thread is on the forums where you can see which missions they are, and everybody is encouraged to go ahead and go vote. We had to truncate voting time a little bit because there was a bug that started at the last patch, which made it so you couldn't accept a mission, Foundry mission. Which was kind of annoying because that was when I was going to start voting. But so we've got 2 weeks to vote. Next, let's see, what is it? I said Tuesday the 5th was when I was going to cut off voting. So get playing and shoot me a PM on the forums as your vote with the mission that you think is best. If you are one of those people who cannot go to the forums, send me a Twitter PM. My contact info is at the end of the show all the time. The plan is to announce the winner after whatever downtime we get. Zero is saying that she should play the winning entry on her live stream. That would be a lot of fun. But yeah, after downtime, I'm going to announce the winner. I figured that would probably be best because when I put the name of the winner out there, I want to make sure that people can play it. And obviously, during downtime, nobody will be able to play it. So here we go.
Okay.
We will be in future episodes. I think we're going to go ahead and be reviewing them. That'll be one of our tasks that we've taken on for ourselves. So let's move it on to what we've been working on. And I'm going to start because I have to leave a little bit early tonight. And I haven't been in the Foundry lately, but I had a little project that I did over the weekend. Sir Boulevard was working on a new issue of Jayce's Navy Interstellar, which, of course, was the sort of faux magazine article that Thomas put out with the, what do you call it, the flagships when those were released, the Federation flagships. It was, in a sense, like a, I think Jane's is what they call it in modern times, where they detail all of the Navy vessels and that sort of thing, and weapon systems. We really liked that, and Sir Boulevard was working on one for the Ambassador class because he loves the Ambassador class. A lot of people do. Thomas the Cat loves the Ambassador class, and he was kind of making it sort of as a present for Thomas, inspired by what Thomas did. And he was kind of casting about for anybody who might have access to Adobe InDesign, which is a page-making software, and I happen to have that. And we were talking back and forth, and I was like, well, you know what? I'll put it together for you. and I wasn't quite sure what deadline he was going to want for that. And then over the weekend, he said, can we have it done Monday? And I'm like, oh, crap. Well, yeah, okay. And then it actually turned out the whole thing only took me about 2 hours to come up with something that I was really pretty happy with. And we had some really just fantastic art for it. He took some of the screenshots himself, and then we had him. I'm searching for the proper name here. Let me see here. He gets slipped to the second page of Reddit here. So I want to make sure I get it right. Kuru Mimorishita. Japanese name that I can't pronounce.
Kurumi Morishita.
Yes, there we go. Did a lot of the bigger pieces of artwork, and honestly, I was really happy with how it came out, and the response to it has been fantastic. Just overwhelmingly 100% positive, and you know, to the point where I kind of like to do more of these. I think it'd be fun. It was just preliminary discussions with Sir Boulevard said, you know, maybe quarterly or something like that. We could put these together. He kind of did it in the style of an interview with a captain of a particular ambassador class, and a really neat piece of writing, I thought. And it was really a lot of fun to take all of that and all of the artwork and put it together in a way that would be like a modern magazine. Obviously, I think in the 24th century or 25th century we are now, it'd probably be a bit different. You wouldn't have magazines, you know, you'd have something that you'd be reading on your pad, but maybe it'd look similar. I don't know.
Well, one thing that I found to be interesting while reading the actual Janes is that it's not written by people who have inside information. So it's a compilation of what's publicly known about the vehicles featured in it. So it might have what's the best way to put this? Creative observations from the people writing it that may or may not actually match up with reality.
Mhm. That's something you could play with if you were writing
because
an
if you're writing one, that would be one of those things, because if you're writing it from the perspective of a Federation citizen and you're writing about a not cool ship, well, you don't have the same sort of information about the not cool ship that a member of the ship's crew would have.
Sure.
You're, writing about
you
things
wouldn't have access to classified info on it either.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I would like to maybe read some of the real ones. I from the design standpoint, I was actually I kept a lot of my copies of PC Gamer back when I used to have a subscription back in 2002, 2003, and I was looking through that for inspiration as far as design goes, and I'm looking forward to doing more of these. Is really kind of a chance to cut loose with the design elements. But that's what I've been up to. So, plus taking screenshots last night of the new Constitution. I was mainly in search of Reddit karma, so it definitely got me a lot of that. All right, let's see. Duncan, what have you been up to?
For once, I've been working on less. So I'm continuing on with my next mission in the Starfleet security files. And that's all there is to report on it. Just more dialogue, more maps. I did build a working mining laser. But that's pretty much it for that guy. The main thing I've been working on, though, that I took on as a project because I know I could finish this before downtime, was revamping Gemini again for a 4.0 update. And that included major dialogue overhauls for a lot of the mission stuff, some new optional dialogues, and a new ground map, which I sent a screenshot over.
This is the one you're talking about?
Yeah, the two pictures. Both of the same map.
Okay. I got
And for reference, this is replacing a stock map that I was using for a hidden space station. This is the main boss room that's on the live stream right now that I'm watching, so I don't know how the time delay is going to feature into that. So yeah, I've got ceiling detail, I've got miscellaneous detail all over the place, miscellaneous geometric architecture, and some other stuff. So that was actually built using the empty stock map that we got, and I set that to an elevation of 100, and actually found a way of getting around the texture on the mini-map from the 5-foot. I just laid some foundation blocks down and made a nice opaque black backdrop for that. So that is currently live, and that's the sort of main boss room, and then the other screenshot I've got is of another part of the lab interior, which is basically just a bedroom. And that's pretty much it. So that was interesting, going back to that, rewriting some major dialogue, replacing some objectives, which I didn't think worked so well. And that's currently out right now.
It's amazing how much work, though, you can do on something that is, quote, just a bedroom.
Yeah, like small little...
Because I see that, and I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, like, how many hours of work is that?
Actually wasn't long.
No?
I'm getting pretty efficient at this. So especially when building out things in sequence, it was the hallways that took more time, and I don't have a screenshot of those, but only because I used a metal grating, and then I had pipes underneath that. So setting that all up to work right, that took a lot more finagling, because the metal grating item, it's not necessarily... Oh, it's not something that is sort of designed to work in sequence. So if you put two together, you'll have the overlapping texture flickering. So I had to set each individual one to a slightly different height in the coordinate system, down to the 1000th place in the coordinate system. And doing that through two hallways, and then having all the underlying detail, making sure the lighting didn't show things that I didn't want them to see, like the fact that there's nothing below that. So altogether, that was the sort of the main part of the build. And then the bedroom was basically like, okay, all I have to do is align 3 little vases to a shelf. It's so easy now.
All right.
Preview, nope, change. Preview, nope, change. Preview, nope, change.
That sounds familiar.
Mm-hmm. Wonder if the real devs have that problem.
I hope they can
you know,
align in a
if
3D
If they're
editor.
building the map, you know, they've got that, but you know, you'd still probably want to see it from a gameplay perspective, right? Wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure they do tons of testing.
You'd want to, you know, you can look at your map from the bird's eye view and 3D and go all around it, but you'd still want to see it from the player perspective. I would think from a player character.
One thing to note on Gemini, it's a finished mission, so the load times on that one are basically at the maximum. So that was like in terms of time, that was probably a good 50% of the total build was just load time.
All right, Mark, what have you been working on?
Well, I did actually do a few tweaks to my challenge mission. One of them was a very minor thing because apparently I had forgotten to properly label the button to start the mission. So when you got to the start, you saw this generic label that didn't really tell you what it was.
I'm going to say most people had that problem with the AEI challenge. So the one thing to recommend for people wanting to go play that, pick in one mission and then go ahead and queue that up and then play it. Because if you do what I did and queued up all 7 that I have to play
Yeah,
through.
I saw a screenshot of that. There were just so many buttons there. You couldn't figure out which goes with which, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was basically Wheel of Foundry. So I could pick out 2. And then the rest of it was just like, oh, let's see what I'm playing now, which is actually interesting because it's kind of like a blind experiment. So you don't know whose mission you've got. You're just sort of playing that thing.
Here, I pull up the shot that you had. Yeah, it's like that's the mess.
Well, that's
yeah,
why I always advise people to make the first button to enter your mission say something like begin mission title.
Yeah.
As you can see, one of them does. Shades of Intrigue does.
Yeah. Or at the
and Apex does.
Yeah. Apex. Yeah, I've learned at this point. I did start out by trying to make it very specific to the plot of the mission I was just about to start, but then I got around to everyone else's point of view that, you know, it's just best to label it. Yeah.
Yep.
We had Wheel of Foundry going.
Well, I you know, one of the things I've been intentionally lenient on is people making little tweaks to their missions, just so long as nobody completely redoes their mission while the challenge is going on. We're fine.
Yeah, I've made a few edits, mostly just wording on a few lines, nothing added. Although I did
and
change
especially progression breaking stuff.
Oh yeah,
you want to fix that.
Yeah, and I think there's one person out there who might still need to tweak some things on that end. I'm not quite sure. I know one had a significant problem where beam down, and then I just died because I couldn't equip the EV suit at all at that point. It's just like, no.
All right, Dragoon, what have you been working on?
Nothing Foundry related except for I've been trying to make a Foundry patch design that we can use for the authors can use for Star Trek Las Vegas.
For T-shirts.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I guess that's kind of Foundry related, although it's not in the Foundry.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So
and you know, you'd be surprised because we made some T-shirts for 2014 when a bunch of us were going, a bunch of Foundry authors, and we actually had people come up to us and say, "Hey, I played your missions." I mean, it was only a few, but it was still I thought it was pretty cool.
So yeah, I'll probably have like the patch in the front and then maybe some kind of design in the back that authors can add their mission list to.
I think that's an excellent idea. All right, so unfortunately, I have to leave. I'm going to leave you with 2 things. The first is a joke. Why does the Enterprise E have a dune buggy? It's to pick up pieces of data. I don't take any credit for that one. I got it from a guy on Reddit. We were talking about motorcycles and dirt buggies and what have you. Pretty bad. And the second thing is, I'm going to leave you with this discussion topic to start you off with. We asked last time for ideas about old Star Trek games or other Star Trek games, and what could Foundry authors take from older Star Trek games to kind of use in their missions. And I think probably the obvious one that people are going to assume that I'm going to say is Elite Force, because I mentioned it every time. But I have a specific reason for answering with Elite Force, is that the great thing about that game is it created this group of junior officers that were the focus of the mission. And I think that's something that is good for us to do, is to create characters that are not bridge officers, that we can then kind of center missions around. And Elite Force had some really compelling characters, I thought. And so give that one a play and see that aspect of it.
All right.
But you guys can talk about the rest of that. I have to get going. So I will see you all next time.
So I will point out that we actually did get a response to our last week's community question, and Star Trek Hidden Evil was suggested as a video game that we should look at.
I don't know that one.
It wasn't as popular. The controls were a little more tricky.
It was for PC?
Yeah, it was for PC. In fact, I've got it over on my shelf. But it was set. You were an ensign on the Enterprise E. You were basically tackling these bugs. It's been a while since I've played it, so I don't remember all the details clearly, but yeah, I mean, I think it's probably worth at least a look.
Let's see. I was just going to say, for me, like, it really kind of comes down to either Star Trek Armada 2 or Starfleet Command 3. And both of those were relatively light on plot, character stuff. Well, maybe not so much plot on Star Trek Armada 2, but it's more sort of the style of gameplay that I personally look at when taking a look at those. Also Star Trek Legacy for the Xbox 360. But just sort of really focusing on that aspect, trying to kind of do more of the storytelling just through setting up a particular encounter that the player goes through, and approaching it a little bit more than I think some of us, particularly me recently, get into with a little bit of combat, where it's basically just sort of there to keep the action up or keep the connect various bits of plots together. So it'd be a much more mechanical view. So not necessarily anything from canon or characterization or anything else like that, but just really how they approached the act of making a video game.
I mean, that's definitely one of the big challenges of Star Trek, is transposing what is a TV show with a very specific format into a video game, which requires a very different format.
Yeah. And with Star Trek Online in the Foundry, you can get pretty close. I mean, it's dealing with the player character, I think, is sort of the biggest point of departure, and also just the miscellaneous limitations of the Foundry editor. But you can structure an episode, whereas with Star Trek Armada, you basically are kind of approaching it more from a historical battle perspective. So you could approach something like a particular siege on, well, you could like look at the Siege of Cardassia, for example. Not that this occurred in Armada 2, but it occurred in the show. But the show, in its approach, focused on the characters, but the battle scene was basically just ships blowing up, and you didn't really appreciate any tactical aspect or strategy to it. You do have to take a little bit of a different look with the video games, though. They really had to indulge in that and kind of build more there than was available in the show for most things.
For the record, Armada 2 is another one of those games I have on my shelf, so perhaps we
Yay.
will. They'll be one of the ones we take a look at.
Hmm.
I have the distinct
I'm
impression
actually-
that we'll have more suggestions than we will weeks of the Foundry being down, but I think we can still work them in.
Yeah.
I'm actually not the kind of person who really goes in deep for story games. So the Star Trek game that I really played the most of was Birth of the Federation. The coolest thing with Birth of the Federation, though, is that the devs of that game made a point of doing call outs to the TV show whenever appropriate. So the in-game bios of all of the various minor races you encounter, they don't really spell out the entire history of the race as seen in the TV show, but they give you a perspective on how that race or what that race did in the TV show. Although their comments were cryptic enough that you wouldn't necessarily understand what the race did in the TV show. Well, for example, the Malkorians. In the TV show, we see the Malkorians as a race that is on the verge of inventing warp travel and meeting the Federation, who is literally right next door to them. Because the Malkorians are one of those planets that their solar system is inside Federation space, but since they are a pre-warp civilization, the Federation is not going to initiate contact with them. In Birth of the Federation, their description of the Malkorians doesn't mention the pre-warp thing, and it spends more time talking about how they have a interesting approach to propulsion technologies, and that is considered unconventional by Federation standards.
So I haven't played Birth of the Federation. What is the gameplay like?
It's the 4X game. It's one of those where you manage an interstellar empire. There's no story or anything like that.
Okay, so it's kind of like a precursor to Armada, or that may be a bad example.
It's actually the game that it's most similar to is actually Master of Orion, because it was actually made by the same development team.
I don't know what that one is either.
Oh,
I've heard of the game. I haven't played it.
Yeah, it's one of those Masters of Orion. I've heard of that one before. I just haven't seen the gameplay.
Again, it's a game where you build. You start out with a planet, you build an armada, blah blah blah. Then you would try to take over the universe.
Ah, okay.
Okay, so it's probably. I think the best way to describe it is it's like Armada in that you're controlling fleets, but it's more widespread than a single Space Domain. It's turn-based.
Okay. Now, where I pick up on the space RTS genre is pretty much Star Trek Armada 2, StarCraft, and then also Sins of a Solar Empire and a brief dabble in Homeworlds.
So Armada 1 was definitely worth playing too. In the time since I played it, I've since lost my copy of the game.
I had them both. Armada 2 I liked a little bit better because primarily because of warp drive. And also tactical fusion cubes.
Those were cool. I did like the warp drive and how it made the fleet of ships look like it was like a swimming school of fish.
Yeah, I remember playing some multiplayer with a friend of mine, and the whole idea there was basically us just trying to cooperate against the AEI. up until the point he was, one of us would be playing Cardassians, one of us would be playing Romulans, until we could basically just start trying to nuke each other with the subspace distortion ships that we had.
So I think the game that I would have to put up as something that I've found the most inspiration for in making Foundry missions is the Star Trek 25th Anniversary, which was, I think, one of the first Star Trek adventure games. It was a point and click. Obviously, it's well, it's set in the TOS era, and later versions actually got voice acted. But I mean, overall, it was pretty good about kind of bringing the characters into the game, so the dialogue felt like it belonged to each character. But one of the cool things about it that you did was the puzzles. Were involved a lot of okay, so the door is busted and you need to get through, but you need to find parts to find a portable power generator and find cabling um, to power the door, or you can go find a phaser welder to cut the servos, or you can try and repatch the transporter and beam in. And so kind of all of those sort of puzzles.
Neat.
And I know when I did my first Foundry mission, that was kind of what I was trying to emulate, so it's kind of something I was thinking of when trying to think about it. How do you kind of look at gameplay from other games for inspiration?
Yeah, I've got to admit that when I was making Gemini, the games I had most in mind were Mass Effect and Dragon Age. So I had a little bit, just because I had played all that relatively recently. Well, Dragon Age more specifically. I did kind of jump a few generations in gaming, just kind of get straight to something that was already very close to Star Trek Online. So I actually haven't had to do a whole lot of readaptation.
Well, one game that I played for a while that isn't a Star Trek game, but when it came to non-combat gameplay, does kind of influence me in Foundry was okay, never mind, I blanked on the name. Yeah.
Do we want to start going through the list? Got Dr. Brain, Island of Dr. Brain. Crap, that's all I've got. Well, I could also put Myst in there as well, but for me, the non-combat, like, for where I'd have to go for a lot of non-combat gameplay would actually be back to that area of Dr. Brain, Island of Dr. Brain, and those types of kind of more explicit puzzle games.
Well, that's kind of what this one was. Is that it wasn't really an explicit puzzle game. It was that it had puzzles, but it was like a story / investigation thing primarily.
Yeah. Somewhat like Starship Titanic.
Well, this was actually something made for the Nintendo DS.
Oh. I might. Dang it!
Well,
I think,
like I said, it wasn't a Star Trek theme. It was.
Was it somewhat Victorian?
The setting of the game was actually relatively modern.
Oh, okay.
It had the main character in the game is someone who's something like 12 or 16 or somewhere around in there, and you're wandering around.
12 and 16.
It's the JRPG range. They're already an adult. They already have like a mercenary career.
Anyways, it's someone who's old enough to know how to avoid accidentally hurting themselves wandering around by themselves, but not old enough to look like an adult yet.
Pokemon age.
Kind of, yeah. Anyway, though, in the game, what you're trying to figure out is why your character has amnesia. Yeah, because the whole thing is you're trying to figure out why it was that you used to live on this island, and figure out.
Is it Return to Mysterious Island?
No,
Okay.
that doesn't sound right.
Wait, there's 2 Mysterious Island games on the DS?
I don't know if the one I played was a sequel on the PC.
I was just going to say, how many Mysterious Islands focus on that handheld device? Nintendo requirement.
I think
every
it gets
game.
a lot of ports.
Anyway, though, is that you the basic gist of it was that you're going around trying to figure things out, but when you arrive there, you find that the place is in such a horrible state of disrepair that you can't simply walk in and find anything. I mean, you walk up to the front gate, but it has some sort of an automatic mechanism for opening and closing the gate that's broken. So you have to find a way to tinker with the mechanism to make it open the gate so you can get in, etc., etc. And of course, wandering around this creepy building that's half fallen down, looking for things that are related to the story, which in true story-only game fashion often means that you have to go to a location several times because you didn't know that something was important, so you didn't. What's the best way to put this? Your character doesn't notice things because there is no reason for your character to believe that that thing is important. So you have to go find other things to give you clues as to what you need to investigate.
One way to describe that might just be multi-layered, where you have that first layer of just trying to figure out what's going on, which allows you to get to the next layer down from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of I think a little bit more in the modern vein of exploration/adventure games.
So this actually kind of reminds me of another Star Trek game. Have you guys ever played Star Trek Borg?
No.
I've heard of it, and some of the things people said made me curious, so I looked it up, but that was about it.
Do you get to play as a Borg?
Yes. Okay, so I think I should preface this by saying the format is an interactive movie. So essentially, it's a movie shot from first person. So you're this ensign who basically gets to go back in time to Wolf 359 and try to save his dad. And so Q's helping him along. And so you get to do all of these things that in the past at Wolf 359, trying to like investigate the Borg and all the events that lead up to the destruction of his ship in the battle. You do actually get assimilated at one point. One of the interesting, usually the interaction is like having to click on the right thing at the right time, but a lot of times your progression is dependent on you having knowledge of what went wrong. Because when you like die or something goes horribly wrong, Q resets things for you, sends you back earlier. But there are a lot of times where, for instance, you get assimilated by the Borg, and as a Borg, you get to see like access codes that you couldn't have known if you had done things right. And so that later you can take that knowledge back, and you get reset and unassimilated. You can go and then use that knowledge you acquired from failed attempts. But when you had talked about having to go through an area and not know what you needed to know ahead of time, and then to therefore had to go back. That kind of reminded me of that.
Yeah.
Well, one specific example is in one of the things, if I remember right, is there's this painting on the wall. The first time you look at it, the painting doesn't really mean anything to you. Then you go around, you look at other things, and then you realize that the painting is important, so you take it off the wall and look behind it. That sort of thing.
There might be a little bit of that going through Apex, my AEI challenge mission, but it's basically like, oh, wait a minute, that was actually important for some reason. Oh, for background story and setting reasons, but I didn't incorporate any of that into gameplay.
Oh, that seems like something we could play around with in the Foundry. Is that idea of you going through or having players explore a map non-linearly, where they there are things that they need to find, but they don't know where to look initially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's also one of the other AE challenge missions gets into that a little bit, with a little bit more freeform exploration through a structure, and the player's basically tasked to try to figure out what's going on with it from the various bits in the environment. But they're all it's more sort of a radial structure rather than something that tries to bridge, I think, between different aspects. It's like you just find all these little bits, and together they make this larger whole for the story.
Yeah.
I was also going to suggest, though, the basic premise from Star Trek Board. I was thinking about, like, that'd make a good Foundry mission. Oh, wait, it's already been made, and it's also, I think, the most played one, because that's the first Cause and Effect by Rogue Enterprise. Does a little bit of that through time jumping.
Yeah, you're right, and so I think he's specifically it's a play on cause and effect, but yeah, it's kind of the same idea of need to go through the same events several times in order to figure out how to beat it.
Yeah. And those are interesting, but for me, just kind of going through those, there's a little bit too much of a sense of inevitability when I can sort of lock onto the pattern. And this is also true with the other time loop episodes in Star Trek, where I kind of get, I don't know, a little bored, a little impatient. It's like, okay, I can solve this now. Oh, wait, no, I've got to go through another time loop because apparently my character didn't piece everything together.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily not saying that's what we should take away from that. But I'm saying that concept of they're to kind of embrace that sort of non-linearity to maps.
And that'd be sort of a great way, especially to kind of make the most of the effort it takes to actually put together a map. I mean, if you can find things that really delve with not only just spending time there, but spending time there engaging with that setting, that could really pay off.
I don't know. I mean, might be something that I do in the future is to really kind of do a mission that plays around with um, that sense of mystery and having to figure out a space, starting in like with no idea what you're supposed to do, and then have it set up so they can find clues and then figure out more of the space and work it up until they finally figured out how to get past the thing that's blocking them.
And then you have a different thing blocking them.
I can only make the map so big.
I just gonna say Apex kind of does that, except I never get around to explaining. Yeah, it's just the 2001 Space Odyssey vibe of, well, you drilled. I've got an idea in mind, and I don't want to spoil the mystery. And it's actually been pretty funny because I got in one review that had a very different interpretation of what the mission was about, which was, I thought, pretty cool. Or at least from my point of view, might be more confusing to that individual.
It's always fun because the players will variably look at a mission differently than you thought they would.
Mm-hmm. Although sometimes that's less charitable.
All right, so there any other topics want to talk about?
I was kind of like, I've been thinking about a TOS mission. So we were throwing around the idea of a TOS Foundry challenge, but I'm sort of trying to narrow my ideas down to, regardless of whether or not we do that, I do want to put together a TOS mission, but specifically, I want to do a TOS Klingon mission.
Okay.
And my question for that is, how insane is that going to be to try to reconcile all the different races? Like, how to approach this. So you have all the different races of the Klingon Empire that the player captain can conceivably be. Almost none of them make sense for being there.
Including the Klingons.
The Klingons. My idea for that was actually to have, like, if for the Klingon dialogue options, just this running, almost just gag of the Klingons you interact with mistaking you, assuming that because you look the way you do, that you are the Kuva Mog. Just get mistaken.
Foundry Timeline.
Yeah, and just do something completely kind of off the wall with that. And you've got options for the Orions. Nausicaans are around 2. I think they're kind of the most straightforward. Orions, you're not quite sure where they are politically. That's sort of a big gray area, but that's still something to work around. And then Lethians, we have no idea.
Well, I mean, that's assuming, of course, that you take it in the traditional time travel sense.
That's what I want to do. Because that's the kind of the most insane approach, and that's the one that would sort of give me the most fodder. So, like, this is sort of just the idea for... I've kind of got Klingons pegged to running gag of being mistaken for the Messiah. So I basically have the life of Brian running through that movie.
So was there a question in there?
Well, I'm just kind of wondering how to approach everyone else. So I've got the Klingons nailed down, but I have no idea what to really do for the Orions, for example. So the mission would be, player goes back in time, has to solve some temporal incursion event involving some other species, probably within a cool, because I've not done a mission with those guys yet.
All right, so
Nicole are up to something. You're Klingon. You have to stop them in a Klingon area. So you're dealing with TOS Klingons, but you're dealing with TOS Klingons, dealing with the Nausicaans, Orions, and Lethians specifically. And I just don't know how to approach that. Like, do I treat?
Well, for the Lethians, you could have them as this like utter wild cards, because it's conceivable that the Klingon Empire did not meet the Lethians until DS9 era. So for that one, you could just simply have the Klingons be like, "You're a weird alien. What are you?"
Yeah.
Orions are definitely a race that are from TOS.
Oh
they
yeah,
exist.
the Klingons would definitely recognize an Orion on sight.
They would, but would they treat them hostilely or neutral? Like, do we want to, or do I play up the neutral aspect, or do I sort of do more of a gray area?
I would actually have to go with they're a race that the Empire has obviously met. They were not allies, to my knowledge, until the events in the lead up to the Star Trek Online, the Path to 2409 thing. Mm-hmm. That's the first time the Klingon Empire and the Orions were allies. Yeah. See, because in TOS era, at least early TOS era, that is, the Orions were actually loosely allied with the Federation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that they were
not necessarily allied, but having some kind of diplomatic relationship, and maybe.
Yeah, I mean, they were friendly with the Federation, and the Klingons weren't.
Well, I should say, I mean, for the most part, the Orions were like pirates, slavers, or traders. One of those two. So, I mean, you could maybe get out that
they were attempting to pretend they weren't.
I mean, they weren't pretending to not be traitors.
Exactly.
And it's not inconceivable that the Klingon Empire would trade with the Orions.
So kind of keep up with a more of a black market aspect to those guys.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like, I mean, it's not like the Klingons never traded with anybody. So I mean, it's not like inconceivable that they would see an Orion as just, oh, you're here to trade or something like that.
Mhm.
They do have to have a functioning society.
Yeah,
That's the thing to remember about Klingons.
Yeah, and I think that comes across a little bit more in TOS than the later productions, because the later productions really focus on them having that warrior mystique. Yeah, warrior mystique. They don't have any scientists. They barely have any engineers. It's just punching, blood wine, and somehow getting the torpedo system to work.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it doesn't really make sense, and it's one of the reasons why a lot of fans have come to the conclusion that Klingon society has changed drastically over the years that they've been an empire, because how would they build an empire when they basically don't bother with science? That doesn't make sense.
Especially Enterprise tried to explain this and basically said, "This is like, look, yeah, if you're interacting with our scouts on the border, all you're gonna ever see is the warriors. Not until you actually bother to go to Kronos and leave the capital, or at the very least leave the Great Hall, that you're actually going to see the normal people."
Yeah. And for me, that's going to be just personally why I want to get down to a Klingon mission, because I do want to develop that a little bit more, as I've kind of worked on a few other aspects of various Star Trek factions, trying to build out a little bit more into those. So, yeah, that's some good stuff to think about, especially with the Orions, and also Klingons too, because I was definitely approaching that more from the joke angle, but I could also wrap them in a little bit to the miscellaneous alien. Maybe people don't, in that timeline, just sort of assume that Klingon, at that point, that if someone appeared to them as a classical Klingon, they may not take that at face value. They may sort of suspect, oh, you're just trying to look like that, or going with cosmetic surgery.
Actually, one thing that came up as a consequence of the reinterpretation of why the Klingons look different is that it wasn't necessarily the entire empire that suffered from that condition. Thus, maybe there were people on certain colony worlds who escaped and certain ones that didn't, and it would seem as though the majority were affected, but we don't really know for sure if it was the majority or just the ones that we saw in TOS the most often.
I'm just wondering, with TOS, those Klingons, did we ever see a civilian Klingon population?
No.
Okay.
No, but there's only a handful of Klingon episodes, and
exactly,
it's pretty much all the crew of a ship.
What I'm thinking with that is that you could justify that it's a relatively small proportion, but what that proportion did was basically service the major stock of people who went into the Klingon Defense Force. Is that basically they were barred from normal civilian life in major colonies, in major population centers, because they didn't want to spread that infection. So the only alternative they had left until they found the cure was to basically go into military service. And they could do that on 14 starships.
Treating them like space lepers, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Or you could frame it as losing one's ridges was the height of dishonor, and that going into battle was the only way to reclaim it.
Yeah,
that's dumb.
So,
well,
it would lead to it.
You basically
an influx.
I was just going to say, you basically become human when you get that condition, and there's also behavioral changes too that they referenced in Enterprise. So just kind of overcompensating and really kind of going out there and trying to make sure that you died in combat. That would make some sense, and also would kind of add a little bit of flavor to the Human Federation War. If it's specifically Klingons trying to basically purge the human out of themselves by attacking human population centers.
Yeah, they also kind of hinted that it Well, there was the one thing where the one guy who he started acting scared because he just the way it reworked the way his brain processed emotions. Suddenly, he felt certain things more strongly than he did before.
Yeah. Well, they've also got the that one monologue by, what was it, the daughter of one of the commanders, basically saying that she sort of felt fear for the first time.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite this. Obviously, Klingons have a concept of fear. Otherwise,
The neurochemistry is out of whack.
but she just all of a sudden she has a total panic attack. It's not just simply feeling fear.
Yeah.
I found it. Trace memory.
The DS game?
Yeah.
Okay.
People give Enterprise a lot of flack, but Enterprise did a lot to try and reconcile some of the inconsistencies in canon.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked Enterprise.
I did too.
How can you just not like the Andorian episodes? I mean, those are gold. They're almost as good as Ferengi episodes.
Enterprise had one of those too.
Yes.
One of the things about trace memory that was the most amusing to me is that in the game, your character has this device that she got from her father that is supposedly to be used as a way to find out what happened and figure out what went wrong and why she can't remember what happened to her parents. And the thing is, though, is that the device that you see in the game actually looks like the first model Nintendo DS handheld devices.
Oh.
So certain of the puzzles in the game require you to do weird things like turn the Nintendo DS itself upside down and stuff like that. So the instructions in the game for doing things like this, they show the character in the game doing that. The one that really bugged me the most was they actually had a puzzle in the game, just one puzzle like this, that actually required you to blow on the DS.
I think Wind Waker also had something like that on the DS. I remember that from that commercial.
Well, what it is that it's actually like some sort of. The DS actually does have a microphone built into it, so it can hear you, but it doesn't really do. Well, most games aren't programmed with voice command, but this one, it would recognize certain sound patterns as you blowing on the DS.
Did you just hold it up to a speaker playing death metal, though? That's the way I do it. So I think that kind of covers it for my original idea for a TOS Klingon mission. But would you guys have any different approaches to that type of concept, or would you more stick to TOS Fed or TOS Romulan?
TOS Romulan would be very interesting because Romulans, even in TOS, were big on the political intrigue. I mean, sure, you had guys like that one who were basically like honorable warrior types, but you also had things like the Romulan commander who took Kirk captive and tried to seduce Spock, who, let's face it, he didn't really care exactly what she had to do to get what she wanted.
Yeah, but she seemed pretty hurt when Spock double-crossed her.
Right, but was it her actually being upset or her merely pretending to be upset?
Oh, I think she was seriously hoping that she could turn Spock and bring him over.
Probably.
Yeah, that sounds more TOS.
Guys, it was Leonard Nimoy. I mean, who wouldn't be? I don't know. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, I've never really had a great idea for a TOS episode that I wanted to pursue. I mean, I'm kind of a child of TNG, so
Yeah.
most of my inspiration tends to be drawn from there. Not that I don't like TOS or anything. I enjoy it, but
Yeah, and I'm definitely the same way. And for me approaching TOS, it very much be incorporating later stuff. So, like, and that's like I'm having to go to the Nakul to really kind of create a plot line for that. Because working in TOS species, like, I kind of have a sense for them, but not necessarily to the extent where I could really go through and write, at least without doing something that's in, like, from a retrospective perspective.
Actually, I
completely
just
looking
thought
back.
of something. Is that how would you write the interaction between Gorn and TOS Klingons?
Ooh.
I was just going over in my mind the list of races in the KDF.
I forgot about Gord.
Yeah, I'm like, tick, Gorn.
I would be shocked if the Klingons had never encountered the Gorn before.
Yeah.
Just because the Federation only met the Gorn during TOS doesn't mean the Klingons hadn't already.
Well, the star charts actually does put the location of the Gorn hegemony as closer to Klingon space than Federation space.
Yeah.
I mean, when Kirk encountered the Gorn, it was on a far-flung outpost that had been recently colonized on a planet that the Federation hadn't really finished exploring yet because it was so far out there.
So the way I'd kind of go about that would be more to put the Gorn as, well, the Klingons, like, responding to a Gorn captain would just be sort of shit, like a little suspicious, but at the same time, like, well, I recognize that you're a fellow warrior, but I don't completely trust you. I think you might be a potential enemy as well. So I'd say uncertain would be how I'd go about that one.
That sounds like a good approach.
I don't know. I mean, the Gorn are portrayed as super territorial.
Yeah.
So I can't
This is
imagine
true.
that they get along well with the equally territorial Klingons.
Well, see, because when you have groups like that interacting with each other, what tends to happen is someone draws a line in the sand, and it's like, this is our side, that's your side, and don't mix.
Yeah.
And that's what usually ends up happening
What
in real life.
Could be the Gorn and
unless they
Klingons
decide to
have
fight centuries.
some kind of a truce in place.
Yeah. Or they've recently made contact, and there simply hasn't been an opportunity yet for that line to be crossed, but it's soon to be crossed. So on this stage when they're both recognizing the fact that they are sort of set up to be rivals in the same niche, and just sort of eyeing each other up. Maybe.
There is actually one other thing we know about TOS Gorn, is that they did actually have a habit of claiming planets as Gorn territory, even if they didn't necessarily have a physical presence on the planet. Because that's how they came into conflict with the Federation, is that the Gorn weren't actually being aggressive. The Gorn saw the Federation as a basically vagrants that had shown up on one of their planets. Granted, it was a planet that the Gorn...
Mine? That one's mine. Mine. Mine.
It's not mine.
That homeworld over there, mine.
Yeah. So one thing that could happen is that the players of Gorn, they beam down and immediately start taking flack for geopolitical tensions between the Gorn then and the Klingon Empire. So you start getting hassled by other Klingons saying, "Oh, are you trying to do to this planet what you did to insert planet name here?"
All right, so I got a great idea for you. Your Gorn beams down to these this TO and Klingon base or wherever this is set, and they immediately mistake your Gorn for the Gorn ambassador sent to negotiate the territorial ceasefire.
Oh yeah. I'm just trying to think of like how to structure this mission. That might be the way to do it, because I still have to try to reconcile one plot around also having
it's
the
almost
life
like
of Ryan with the
5 missions
Klingons.
in one.
All the objectives have to be the same. That's the
all
tricky part.
all the objectives have to be the same. So you have to keep getting mixed into really high level diplomatic situations depending on the species. So maybe you're the Messiah if you're Klingon, you're the ambassador if you're Gorn, you're a high market, very sort of notable or infamous black market contact if you're Orion, and then you're a first contact scenario if you're Lethian, and then Nausicaan just
Or Nausicaan.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Here's a
I could
question.
see you could have some fun with that.
When's the first occasion where we see Nausicaans in Star Trek?
Enterprise, season 1.
No, I meant like real world. When's the first?
Let's see.
You're talking
You've
about the
got-
ones that stabbed Picard?
Yeah, Stab Picard is the one that comes to mind.
That's not the first one.
Were there some in the motion?
The one that stabbed Picard may be the most famous, but he didn't come up until the last episode of TV.
Yeah.
Wait, one of
what?
the Ferengi that we
No, it wasn't the last episode.
Yeah, it wasn't even close.
But
Last episode was the Picard going back and forth through time, dealing with the anomaly. The one with Picard getting stabbed was when he gets to basically he has something happens. He's dying because of his artificial heart, and Q gives him the chance to basically undo that situation where he gets stabbed. Then he becomes basically a miscellaneous lieutenant in the science department.
And he ends up with this person who is like utterly
insignificant.
Yeah.
All right, so the episode was Tapestry, and it was season 6, about halfway through.
Okay. So we got season 6 for seeing them. They're, I think, referenced in season 2 when Picard is having his shuttle voyage with Wesley. So they're referenced in season 2 then. So then would there have been any shown in the movies? That's what I'm thinking.
If the first one I'm thinking of was a Ferengi had 2 Nausicaans as bodyguards.
Oh, which one was that? Oh, wait, which Ferengi was that?
I'm actually not 100% sure that was a TNG episode, not a DS9 episode.
Let's see. That was Liquid
Allegiance. I think that was Allegiance. Which Allegiance was TNG season 3.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
The Bar Association had brunt with the 2 Nausicaans, and those beat up Quark and threatened Rom.
Wait, never mind. Allegiance doesn't actually have Nausicaans in it. It has the Chalnoth, who are described as being similar to Nausicaans.
Okay. But at least we got Nausicaans in Enterprise, so we can write them pretty easily into the original series.
This is true.
Maybe you could do the Nausicaans like the Klingons mistake them for had hired Nausicaans to take out this carry out this high profile assassination. So they're giving the Nausicaans the instructions to carry out this assassination.
Yeah, that's a good one. Especially if it's an assassination plot with the Nikul in there. That at that point there's competing assassination attempts. So you go back in time to save a guy, but then you end up getting involved in the assassination plot against him, but have to keep that going up to a certain point.
I don't know how in the world you're gonna weave all of this into a single mission.
I don't know, but that's why I want to make it.
Well, kudos for taking on a challenge.
Yeah. So yeah,
Challenge.
Because at this point, I do have 9 missions, and I've got 4 more planned for Starfleet security in this current season.
Well,
So when I get to a TOS mission, I don't want to just make a mission because I've kind of already made a bunch of those. I kind of want to go a little crazy.
Good, maybe it'll slow you down.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, I've actually slowed down with this one. Yeah, I'm taking this one slow. The next mission and next one after that. I think I've finally entering a little bit more of a slower period. But that said, I'd also just did revamp Gemini.
So there's a race you forgot.
Oh, okay. So, join Trill.
yeah.
Well, there is that one, I suppose, but
oh yeah, the
Rassens.
kitties. Yeah, kitties.
I would never forgive you.
I would say that from an in-universe perspective, the Phrasans would be a race that the Klingons should have knowledge of. I mean, because in Stowe, they're said to be a splinter race from the Caitians, much the same way that we have Vulcans and Romulans.
Yeah.
And Caitians have been in Starfleet since TOS.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
Phrasans have been somewhere.
Yeah, I would just do for my personal writing of Phrasans in the TOS era, I would just do a word replaced with a Kzinti from TAS. So I would basically just write out like that perspective on their relationships at that time. I would just kind of go with that because that's kind of what they're based on.
I think the Kzinti were like only in a single episode.
Oh yeah, and I have in one of Larry Niven's other books, he basically rewrote that from the perspective of his known space species.
Well, yeah. The Slaver Weapon episode from TAS was literally a rewrite of one of his short stories called The Soft Weapon.
Yeah, and it was basically just you replace Nessus and Spock and have a couple of miscellaneous humans as Uhura and Sulu.
And that's why we couldn't have Kzinti in Star Show.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's just like, well, we have the Phrasans, which are just basically the same thing.
Actually, I think part of the reason why we can't have Kzinti and Stowe is in part, at least, due to Taldrin pissing off Niven with the way they portrayed the Kzinti in the games that they licensed.
Wait, they licensed Wait, there's Niven-based games?
No, but it was Star Trek games that included the Kzinti.
Oh.
Talking like one of those RPG games.
I think it was one of the Starfleet Command games, actually.
Oh, Starfleet Command.
They got replaced in the later games in that series with the Mirak and the Lyrans, but at one point in time they actually did use the Kzinti.
Oh, I remember the Lyrans and also the Hydrans.
And the Hydrans were just a brand new thing that they came up with just to make up a new race.
Yeah, I actually did like those a little bit because it was basically them at that point trying to create a non-humanoid species.
In the case of the Lyrans, though, the Lyrans were basically just the Kzinti with a new name, more or less.
Well, for what it's worth, I happen to like the Phrasans, and Cryptica's kind of put together some cool backstory about them and their relationship to the Caitians. So, you can do something fun with that.
Yeah, the Phrasans are definitely unique to Stowe. I mean, because let's face it, TOS didn't expand on what Caitians were. You barely even saw them.
But yes, Duncan, if you come up with dialogue for a joined Trill, I will be most impressed.
Oh, god dang it.
That said, I mean, that's probably got to be one of the least common.
Oh, okay.
races
No,
of
I got
KDF,
it. Because at that time, the Trill, Dax served as an ambassador negotiating with the Klingons. So that would be the dialogue option. You're brought in as a Federation negotiator. That's what you're mistaken for if you're playing a joint Trill.
So you're basically mistaken for Dax.
Yes, basically, or one of Dax's associates. Like you just get all this chick about Dax is sending a junior adjutant and all this stuff, and it's just it's gonna be. It is going to be interesting because it's basically every single major piece of dialogue is going to have like 5 options, or 6 because I've got to include miscellaneous alien / Lethian. So I've got that list. So then there basically cannot be any dialogue choices on the lines of like yes or no. It's going to get horrendously complicated. I'm just going to say for other types of dialogue responses because you just have that huge choice right at the start.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what you can do is at the beginning of each map, you put in a choice where you basically get the player to give you what race they are, and from there you can use triggers to
That's
only
right.
show the race for or the choices for that race.
There we go. I've only used those triggers for one mission, and I could totally do that.
It's going to get kind of ridiculous the ways that you try to keep asking the same question for every map, or different ways to ask them what race they are.
Yeah. Or just you're given just a general given a general question, and then your response is something species specific. So at the start of the map, you're asked to respond in some way, and it just has all the labels in there for each of those responses.
Yeah. But yeah, from there, then you can show only the choices for that specific race.
It has just gotten a little bit easier. Except in the fact that the triggers is still going to be a little bit of a finagling. Yeah.
It's going to be easier for the player.
It's
not going to be easier for you.
No. But it'll at least be easier to sort of keep straight. So just going through. So
you'll still see like so many choices for every single.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about like second or third tier dialogue choices after the fact.
Because once you've branched it out, you don't have to branch it again.
Yeah, it's something like that. Or it's just like I'm just looking at maybe one branch. So considering the complexity, I think I might scale back my usual dialogue choices and also scale back optional dialogue because that would also have to be for every single optional dialogue would have to, except conversational dialogue would be unaffected. Conversational dialogue could still be in. Oh.
Yeah, but I mean, if you want to offer the players a choice other than the which race are you, I would definitely make sure it's worthwhile and absolutely necessary.
Yeah. So that would be interesting if we have a TOS challenge. That would be an very interesting build for that type of thing because most of the time it's just going to be spent wrangling the dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that'll definitely keep me interested in at least the sort of the conceptual aspects of the build. So it's not just feeling like, well, I just got to make another mission, which I'm kind of feeling for AEI right now. It's like, okay, I can kind of move on now.
I mean, that's kind of the thing with me is that I always want every mission I do, I need to present a challenge for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. And right now, I'm still sort of in the phase with Starfleet Security where I'm sort of able to keep myself going with a particular plot. But I'm finding with my current build for the Nimbus map, like in trying to build a functioning mining laser, I'm starting to get a little bit more technical. Where it's like, what can I do? And that actually shows up on Apex, but I don't want to talk about it because that's kind of the big ending sort of pizzazz moment. But I think we covered this crazy idea until I started building in variously expressed frustrations on the show. It's like, oh my god, it's just getting too much. That'll be great.
All right, well, I think we have time for one more topic.
What about AOI character ideas? Assuming that the species does not is set in stone, as it is right now. So what are you planning on making for your character?
I haven't settled on one yet. My test character, Evan Tribble, is a female Vulcan, but that isn't something I'm like locked in on.
Yeah.
No, maybe I'll actually make a human. Never made one of those before.
Really?
Really? Closest I've gotten is a liberated Borg human.
Hmm.
Yeah, I've got my human dude here, and that kind of covers the main base of like, oh, well, human male is what I would sort of approach for me going to the TOS era. That's what I would kind of have as my first choice, but that's already out because that's my main character. Like, okay, do something different.
Well, one thing that occurred to me is that of the 4 founders of the Federation races, I used all of them for one or more characters already, except for Tellarites. So there's that.
I've done Tellarite once as a joke character, and he didn't last long. But
Yeah,
there's, yeah,
I mean, because my Foundry character is an Andorian. I have a Vulcan and a human character as like regular characters, so that leaves Tellarite.
yeah, I've done in the past. I've done all of them. Yeah, I'm just not settled. I could do Vulcan or Andorian. Those are my 2 options. It kind of depends on what I want to channel more of, Shran or Saval, basically. I'm kind of approaching it more from that perspective. So a little bit more retro, a little bit more in sort of the Enterprise style for the character idea. And it kind of depends on which do I think might eventually tie into some kind of Foundry character, because that's one thing I do like with my characters in Star Trek Online now. I do like to have a little bit of a sync up, so when I'm playing the game, I can start thinking about other character ideas. So I'm probably going to do Andorian male science. Just as kind of a foil, kind of like a little bit of Shran, but at the same time a little bit Spock, because of the science perspective.
I don't know. Snarky Vulcan diplomat could be fun.
Snarky Vulcan diplomat would be fun. It's just I don't know if there's enough snarky diplomat options.
True. And we really should get them to add more snarky diplomat options.
Yeah, come on. Or at least, okay, or that might be another challenge. So the Foundry challenge, make a snarky diplomatic episode.
I think Tanae stole all the snarky diplomatic options.
Yeah. Have to compete. You do some type of grandparent to Tanae.
I think what I might do is I might find one of my more well-liked bridge officers and then maybe make their parents.
Yeah. Or alternately, you could actually just make it them and just have for them on your bridge crew, it's just them on their off shift. Just deciding to tag along. Yeah, temporal paradox. Well, they're coming to 2410.
Yeah, but they'll already be a captain by then. Actually, I did have an idea. I could make Corin, so we'd be a little out of time. Corin is one of my Foundry characters.
Yeah.
So far, I haven't really tried to bring any of my Foundry characters into the player space.
Yeah, my Foundry character is entirely disposable, and the closest thing he's come to having a tie-in is being the red shirt in Apex.
The only thing I've used mine for is as like a quest giver NPC for one of my missions. I actually used Teton as a quest giver who you talk to, and she gives you the mission and tells you what to do. One of the little like fiction things I wrote up when someone was asking about various player characters on the forum is that I did like short bios written from the perspective of Starfleet intelligence about the various characters. And the entry for Teton mentioned that she has this uncanny ability to go places without being seen, which I stuck in there because, Foundry characters, if your Foundry character is running around ESD, no one who is actually on ESD is going to see her.
They're in the Beverly Crusher pocket dimension.
The shrinking one?
Yeah, that one. Except it's stable. You just have fun.
I know, I always kind of wanted to do a Foundry mission based off of the Beverly Crusher shrinking pocket dimension. You have the ship disappearing around you.
Yeah, that and you could do that with lots of triggers in a custom build.
Like something I never showed on in Foundry ideas.
Get more productive. Make 3 a month.
So Mark, did you say what you wanted to do for your AOI character?
Tellarite. Just because I haven't used one yet.
Bold choice. I applaud you.
It's one of those ones where it's just like, I just for the rarity factor, I want to do Tellarite female, but I just don't know if I could take it for the team.
Yeah, the problem is you got to feel the character, and I don't feel Tellarite.
No, it's the personality type is just being obstructive in some way. And I guess if you're familiar with Terry Pratchett books, you can basically approach a Tellarite like a Terry Pratchett dwarf, which actually does have a lot of subtext and personality, and sort of can make a little bit more out of just being confrontational than has so far been presented in Star Trek. But what that bounty hunter that Archer interacted with, that would actually be a good starting point. So a bit older, kind of a little bit down on his luck, and sort of just from that perspective, that might be a one way to approach it.
I could always channel a forum poster.
Just go into any social zone and just start just getting into trying to start arguments with people, just trying to use the exchange, mocking them. You're not doing it right.
My grandmother could post for a better price.
You're the reason everything is so expensive. You're just sitting around here all day making the prices go up.
Too hot with all these people in here.
Environmental.
I really have seen people ranting in zone chat about how other people were posting things at the wrong prices. Ugh.
That would be funny. I don't know if it would end well. Alrighty. Well, I think we've killed about enough time.
Running out the clock. Oh yeah.
I will say, people can get a hold of us. We can be reached by email at foundryroundtable@live.com, where you're welcome to send us questions, suggestions. If you have a new mission out, we want to hear about it, and we will happily promote it on the show. We are also available on Twitter at FoundryRoundtab. Drogyn can be reached at Drogyn1701. Duncan can be reached at Gorgonops_SSF. Mark can be reached at Markhawkman. And I, of course, can be reached at Greendragoon. All right, and on behalf of the Foundry Roundtable, we will say good night.
Good night.
Good night.